It can't be forever. It can't be forever. I've had to say this about so many games that I didn't think I'd ever see. When obsessing over the Bioshock Infinite that never was, to still clinging to the mad vision of Versus 13, to enduring those agonizing waits between Word on Elden Ring. I've had to say it so many times. Little reassurance comes from the phrase, and the industry will time and time again go out of its way to make sure that that potential never sees the light of day. Yet for each of us, despite the pity, despite the ridicule, there will be one game that we just won't let go. What we or others may know to be true just doesn't matter when even a glimpse can't be silenced. Some games, some visions just don't become a finished product. I can accept that, but if you told me that was fate, if you told me that I would never hold one particular game in my hands, well then I think you know what I'd say. That this one was different. That game is The Last Guardian. "2009 was where we first saw a seemingly close to finished rendition of a young boy running through a bleak, forgotten temple of sorts, tripping over the near edge of the world only to be followed not by a monster, but another lost character. Just behind him was a creature ripped straight from the pages of a bestiary from Studio Ghibli. It charged out onto that same edge of the world and howled at the sky. They sat together, a long journey clearly ahead of them, both lost, but not alone." The next title in Team Ico's loose trilogy, it would be an exploration through gameplay of an unexpected reaction to their prior work. The visionary Fumito Ueda setting out to, on a much grander scale, see if he could get players to make this nameless boy manage to struggle through a bond with this mythical creature, who would come to be known as Trico. It was one of those show-stopping announcements that would just have to become the talk of any industry trade show that could follow. It was to be a demonstration of the artistic freedom that the then still young PlayStation 3 would be the home of, as well as a much needed showing of the console's technical potential at a time when, to be honest, the culture was dominated by only its competitors. In reality though, what they revealed was a ghost. The Last Guardian wouldn't materialize at any future events for years to come, the notable absence stinging even harder when, for years, anyone representing the game just offered a blanket response that, yeah, the game was still coming. An answer that, as we all know, never fails to disappoint. Even after Ueda reportedly left the project that he was the driving force behind, it became incredibly clear that there are some secrets about certain games that we will simply never know. But The Last Guardian was in a new classified territory of its own. For many, the reality of the game going the way of something like Scalebound or 1313 had been accepted, or would have honestly been a mercy under the strain of such radio silence and so many unanswered questions. It was a legitimate mystery for so long that something at least conceptually nailed had to just float in the ether, vaporware that only so many hands would ever be allowed to touch. A mystery that I did patiently endure. I clung to my denial. No other game from this team had failed to remind above all why we play. If this really was to stay a mystery, then I had decided that it deserved my patience. Team Ico, like a lot of Sony's Japan studio, produced work capable of redeeming faith in the medium of games. Even to this day, examining the work of the survivors of the studio's closure, they felt like creatives who were divorced from the buzzwords and explicit demands of the rest of the industry. They weren't really the only ones doing it, but you could feel that they were going precisely where the tech and the art alone led them, not chasing the compromised reactionary business of the money men. So how could Delusion on paper not turn to genuine faith? If ever there was a game to represent the phrase, "coming when it's ready," I chose to believe it would be this one. Feathers would continue to fall and remain still by those enormous chains. Trico's roar was carried across the clouds, eventually permeating through time, until in 2015, our faith was rewarded. In time, former Sony president Shoei Yoshida would admit the extent of the trickery necessary to produce even a slightly believable proof of concept for The Last Guardian. Having to play even early builds for the game in slow motion that were then sped up in post for the public's consumption, it said firmly that Sony's new console of the future was not up to the task. So much of what the game would go on to achieve was genuinely ready before its time. However, the technology not being ready to deliver the experience, in hindsight, feels like it means very little, especially when the game beckoned like it did. Ueda, still under contractual obligation to finish the game, eventually using the advent of the PlayStation 4 to at last truly realize the concept. It wouldn't be until someone like Kojima was available to the company that Sony would rally to get a product across the finish line like they did with this one. Santa Monica was called on for support, and architect of the console Mark Cerny was drafted to see this thing adapted to reach the standard that it originally communicated it would do. Having the opportunity to be rebuilt one last time on approachable hardware, Ueda couldn't have been convinced to return if the resources and effectively all hands weren't put on deck to see this thing reach the ambition that had already cost years. Re-emerging between a new heavy hitter IP and the reveal of the world's most sought-after remake, Trico was once again heard by the world. Just 1 year later, people would at last hold the game in their hands. It was done. I felt as though I could finally let go of the phrase that I had been saying through the entire wait. And then I actually played the game. A sharp exhale erupts from the nameless boy, and you awaken in a dark cavern with a wounded animal. Trico, this snarling beast, doesn't want you near it, but he stands between you and freedom. You have no idea how you got here or why this beast is here with you. All you can really do is put that aside. You approach Trico, feed him what you can, tend to his wounds, and once you've proven you're not a threat, that your natures aren't against one another, you climb upward to find the sun. Eventually sitting beneath it, the extent of what's ahead dawns on you. Trapped in a trench at the bottom of an ancient city of old, you together have to find a way to the tower at the center of the valley. It's the only way to escape this place. You are just a child though, and with Trico's broken wings, you've got no choice but to forge a bond if you ever hope to return to the village that you were taken from. You have to help each other overcome obstacles that you can't face alone, to save not just yourselves but each other from the ones who would keep you here, destined to reside in the ruin under the master of the valley. Wings clipped and hopes low. It's climb together or die alone. It actually feels unfair for me to call any one person the auteur of a project on this scale, so instead I will state that Ueda and all those other unspoken names, they produce work that, yeah, really does just pause everything going on when they decide to finally speak up. Whilst the majority of 2016's biggest and most celebrated titles would go on to inspire and form much of how the industry still looks today, not many of them would let their worlds truly speak for themselves. I mean, just look at all this. The valley is a construction that once taken in, you start to overlook any uncertainty surrounding it. You sit in awe of the time taken because the work done is evident. Like when looking at the work of Rockstar or Kojima, you refuse to accept the generally short lifespan of the piece. Every shard of splintered wood, precise mechanism that you put in motion, the shudder of rubble under a ground-shaking step or leap. No part of what you're seeing feels like it hasn't been handed down across generations. This is a vision so realized that it would have to have already been so well known by those who crafted it. An epic long thought about, now ready to be told in its most prepared form. It's difficult to put into words, but as I consume my surroundings in a sitting that's as long as is necessary, I find myself tricked into thinking that this might as well be a telling of a story that no version of the world should have lived without. The chambers, the staircases, the bridges and the towers, they all exude a reverence for the fundamentally man-made. Where so many artists are compelled to pour all their energy into replicating the beauty of the natural world, here you instead journey together through depictions that focus on what's been lost to time. What we might rationalize this ethereal place to perhaps have once been still doesn't explain what has long since become alien. The structures are man-made, but they feel impossible to try and date. No charts or plans remain. Only the witness marks found throughout this ruin might give us some sense of how we've truly lost the means to build like this. The history and the intent of the landscape are benefited by just being implied. Nothing will ever actually compare to silently acknowledging what only a creator, or those who have even lived to see these ancient structures, can know them to be. All those who get to know these places as anything more than finite are gone. We will only know the valley as a ghost, a still but looming question. How long until we again leave a mark on the world that feels as worthwhile as this does? That initial look at it starts to make you realize something else too. A sense of scale in games is so typically communicated by observing the vast borders of the map, or perhaps by manipulating the environment around the character, making the ordinary seem fantastical. But here, to see a game retain genuine human scale, it's a really impressive choice. I love that after a certain point you realize you're not being asked to traverse outward, but just upward. As the nameless boy barely making some of these jumps, or on the back of Trico forcibly smashing into the ruin that can barely support him, the scale just feels dizzying. You would have to fully bend your back to truly gaze up and try and see what the clouds are disguising, let alone try and wrestle with the camera to do so. but I guess conceiving it feels easier to do than, well, considering the task of actually climbing any of this. It is simply too big for even both of you. The interconnectedness of the land that you traverse being not just a stunning sight to eventually stand above, but a powerful simulation of overcoming nothing short of the real thing. It is a linear expanse, but it's one that you still struggle to chart beyond simply where you've been and what's just starting to come into view ahead. Your respite, your guide, and the one thing that is fit to touch the ruins, being the sun. The colour palette for so much of the journey is very muted. It's this fading vision, a painting that needs restoration, a few little sparks breaking through the cracks. It leaks out of the ceiling, it's at the end of the tunnels and at the edge of the towers, just sat there waiting, the light that sets those radiant greens and ambers just on fire. The places where when you see the sun, you see the world just come to life again. Being in that light was the exact moment for me where the awe of super graphics was at its absolute peak. I can look at what the technology will go on to produce, but seriously, it's going to take something special to arrest me quite like this again. It will not be timeless, it has been surpassed, but to me, it's still irreplaceable. You happen upon these little opportunities to remain in the lush and the green, these secluded corners where you're just close enough to the outside world to start to feel the reclamation. The little rays of light, the traces of the wind, the glistening blades of grass, and the sun breaking through the clouds above it all. They offer an unmatched standard of immersion in the world. The painstaking work clearly paying off when I really need so little to know how it would feel to stand exactly in these scenes. To know precisely the air and the warmth around me. After enough time, I truly know why they're chasing it. Every inch is informed by the presence of the sun. Each step closer towards it, this constant reminder of the finite, of what's already gone, and what's still slipping away. Its shadow at the top of the tower, committing the ruins solely to memory, and its lowering, prompting those few chances to embrace that you have left. Slow illumination, always stating the obvious until you're finally forced to hear it. It can't be forever. Of course, it would be wrong for me to also not address the elephant, or rather the magical creature in the room. Because yeah, as beautiful as that sun is, there will eventually come a time where that magic may wear off, and you start to remember the little pain in the ass that you happen to be stuck there with. So, I cannot deny that in The Last Guardian, the technology does sometimes suffer at the expense of the creative vision. All games by Fumito Ueda have a reputation, but really this is the only one where that's a detriment. The majority of players' initial criticism of just how the game seemed to control being perhaps why this is the only other first-party Sony game of that era that, well, just didn't become a mega hit like those games just naturally did. I get why frustration became a roadblock. The movement and the camera are severely outdated, even for the time, and they're highly flawed. This is the result of the game being a project that was passed through so many different generations of consoles that were very hard to truly separate from once the work was done, but it definitely isn't fun to have to fight with the game just to achieve the basics, and it's certainly not inclusive. Those problems only look worse too when you also have to contend with a disobedient Trico. He acts independently of you and will frequently misguide you from the direction of puzzles or objectives, and it's unavoidable to say that yeah, at points, your time will be wasted by this game. All of us who actually played it had to at one point or another question if technical fault was actually at play. And for a game that took this long, that's expected but still inexcusable. And also admittedly quite annoyingly fascinating. Yes, with this game I do play devil's advocate because as much as I do condemn, I am still drawn to engage with something that's not necessarily broken but so overtly the sum of very specific parts. At the end of the day, no other team gets to execute an idea like this on this scale. And that will always be something special. I mean, unless if it's in the indie scene, the business and certain players just don't respond well to those games that you have to will yourself to see through. So if the studio really was going to leverage the prestige of their lineage, then I appreciate that it was done in service of the vision, that they cashed their blank check to do something that would be entirely on their terms. Ueda's previous game unexpectedly drew attention to the relationship between the player character and his horse. He became something of an icon in his own right because of it. And that unexpected fascinating reaction quickly became the focus of what would come next. The next step being to make playing alongside Trico be completely the experience of owning a pet. Through your journey together, you go through the difficult process of taming and building a bond with a wild animal. Trico is so unique because there's no compromise on time devoted to the highs and lows of that process. Frustration is a requirement. Your patience will be pushed to its absolute limits, but inevitably, the rewards will come. At a time where we had seemingly really worked out how to do in-game companions, To look back at any of those partners after your time with Trico is to now see just a totally obedient stretch of code. So many of those interactions really do just start and stop at the moments where you allow the acting or the animation to progress to its completion, if you even chose to at all. Those who walk beside you ready to duck in silence the very moment that you chose to ram past them. The soul-destroying moment where games started to normalize stating that you don't even need to look after the person that's following you. I knew it was somewhat over, only very little of what would actually follow really resembling a relationship. An actual push and pull that didn't make the experience unfolding be just about you. Trico is a direct stand-in for nature as a force, so therefore your bond to him, despite the marketing and maybe even the expectations of the genre, is not a given. Your connection simply cannot be taken for granted. Coexistence has to be a consideration if either of you are to hope to flourish. With no dialogue and just some vague button commands, there is only progress through interaction. We can never truly know one another, but I still have the choice to pluck up the courage to at least try. All that I have as this nameless boy are the means to convey what we can do if we work together, which, just like with a real animal, you can only really spell out by approaching it on its own terms, carefully putting your hands on it, and slowly confirming that it's safe to know you. There's no typical game makeup for us to cling to support that process. No system-based communication of progress, no HUD, no visual gauge of your bond. You're only told the buttons to press, and then left to do the rest. It's a brave and very refreshing decision, a legitimate challenge to our attachment to distractions to the core experience, that Ueda chose to forcibly throw out if it meant that all attention was on Trico. As it should have been. Nothing could get in the way of the natural observation that he isn't obedient. His mannerisms and his ferocity constantly reinforce that he doesn't know who his master is anymore. The petting does say, "Well done, good boy," and you're going to need to let him know that for quite a significant chunk of the journey, but eventually, it will only be needed to communicate just one thing between you. I'm here. He has his reasons not to trust you. He doesn't comprehend how he might even be hurting you, and he may only sometimes choose to listen to you if you can give him some kind of reward or motivation to do so. That trial and error being essential to finding this worthwhile place, not where he obeys you, but where he will make you a part of his nature. You put your hands on him, choose to simply let yourself just be with him, and slowly you'll see him feel the need for that care less and less. For him, after a time, simply just knowing that you're there will be enough. If you didn't hesitate to show him the comfort that we know he needs, he won't hesitate to grow to know you. To go through all of that is to somewhat understand why the wait, for Trico specifically, it had to happen. They could have built the world and some kind of compromised version of what makes Trico, but they would have had to sacrifice the nuances of what draws you to him without direct prompting. He could only ever have been a vision of what's to come, rather than the still unique piece he remains. This brilliant, freakish blend of all the lovely pets that you had as a child, rolled neatly into one wholly perfect design. He's really the more platonic ideal of a mythological creature, rather than the weird amalgamations that could only ever be their own thing. To me, whether it's in the art or models, either digital or physical, Trico just effortlessly shines. There's not a frame where I'm not drawn to him and what I might manage to notice. Any of his rendered feathers, the horns that shine like some kind of emerald mineral, or in particular when his eyes reflect the light at just the right moment. They give him this space to put between us, and it reminds me that he'll never be totally known to me, if I can only sometimes glimpse that shade of him. The illusion of Trico being this real, breathing entity, it never broke because, even to this day, I still feel like I barely saw a fraction of his many layers. I just never came close. And how could I? Trico's animations are built up of a set of thoroughly refined keyframes. Exhaustive effort had to go into realizing them, but they were worth it. None of that stiltedness or rigidness ever appearing. If he's scratching his ears, he's breathing when he's resting, when you spot the slow sway of his loose tail, or when he sprints across those platforms, you see animations that are an amalgamation of the ideas from the many pet owners who must have been on the team, in displaying traits common to all the animals that he is born from. Rather than just being made from the captured performance of a single one, he becomes so much more personable. A breathing canvas to attach to him whatever thoughts of your own pets or wildlife that you choose to do so. And once you inevitably do so, you see that Trico had to be the way he is. That the game without the struggle just isn't a conversation worth having. Even considering the flow that choice would afford, nothing would hurt more than for that companionship to feel hollow. When he feels that a part of everything that I do, and when I see him in all the pets that I've known, It would be a tragedy to not consider our bond as something that I had to be responsible enough to try and see through. That he was worth the effort. I don't love Trico because he felt like an achievement to overcome. He's not some rival to return to sharpen my blade against. I care because I never felt like I couldn't come back to him. Even on the very shaky ground that we stand on, despite our flaws, and despite our being at times downright irritants to one another, we managed to go from a place of convenience and warmth to mutual respect and shared empathy, along with all of the collapsing ruins and the bloody battles that come with it. I do also think that some credit has to be given to the fact too that Trico also deserves to be this way. Late into the game, the influence of the Master of the Valley will become simply too strong for Trico to bear, and in this mortifying strike, a possessed Trico swallows you whole. In the interim, we learn truly how we both got here. The nameless boy was taken by Trico by force, stolen from his village in the middle of the night, and taken to feed him to the Master of the Valley. This is a process that has gone on for clearly some time. The Guardians under the reign of the Master are destined to turn you into food. This strike was always coming in one way or another, and Trico, willingly or not, would have been forced to do this as many more times as he could. Trico and the boy just happened to be the ones graced by fate. A freak bolt of lightning blasts you out of the sky, plunging you to the bottom of the canyon, but freeing you both of the reign of the Master and the turmoil that all those in this cycle exist under. How therefore, when you wake up in that cave and saw him snarling, could you not understand why he behaves the way that he does? Like a wounded animal. Between the two of you, he's the only one who remembers. The only one who comprehends being struck to his death. He's the one who's harmed repeatedly by his own kind, and he dares not progress past those images of the Master that remind him of his imposed servitude. The truth is, no one just opens up after this. You as the boy are in over your head. You're stumbling over your own feet, and sometimes you're not even looking before you leap, but you're not the only one struggling under the weight of these events. Trico is cautious because the world has made him so. Unlike you, he still lets his flaws stop him from moving forward. Thankfully though, your influence, your presence, is starting to change that. After showing what he might do to you at his worst, you come to this beautiful moment where you come to see what you mean to him. Yes, it's one thing to watch him attack an army to rescue you, but it's another entirely to sit through this torturous stretch of him not being ready to let go of you. After he's attacked you, you have no choice but to sit and watch him drag your seemingly lifeless corpse around, all until he manages to wake you up, painfully aware of what he doesn't want to recognize. He will lumber back and forth, gently prod you, carry you around in his mouth, he'll scream at the sky and sit with you for as long as he has to. The task for you is to let him do it. You have to admit how much you've asked of him already, and for the first time, give yourself over to what he alone can accomplish, to even the slightest chance that he alone might work out how to save you. Because of you, he knows that he's no longer broken. Someone has been around for him and has just been a positive influence for long enough to show him a way of being beyond what he's endured. He can live with that fact that you might be gone, and he could escape by this point alone, but why would he want to let go of the person who got him there, who taught him there was another way? You eventually awaken, resuscitate thanks to Trico, the return of the controls being also a point of no return. From here on out, you've admitted he's an equal, not a companion, not a pet. You've rescued each other. And now it's time to do it again, one last time. Flying and climbing to the center of the valley, to the tallest tower, as you come the closest to the sun you thought you'd ever be, the pair finally encounter the Master of the Valley. Both of you, but Trico in particular, have been bruised and beaten. He's bled throughout all of this. So it would seem only right to finally get to tear into something other than just metal, to together deliver a righteous moment of justice against those who have wronged you. But deep in that lifeless granite sanctum, you just find the cold as steel. The Master is nothing more than a silent computer of some kind, a machine gone wrong with no one left to correct the damage it's done. In the absence of life not ruled by the Master of the Valley, Trico and his kind have been forced to kidnap children, and that cycle has endured. What once possibly could have been something meaningful has devolved to willingly abusing and discarding any flesh that it has to just to survive. You strike your mirror onto it and its vile image, and you let it shrink until it means nothing. You wipe from the slate of the world the progenitor of only suffering. It shrieks and it begs for the rest of Trico's kind to rip you to pieces, desperate at the end to be the only thing left from this place to be remembered. You blast it into nothingness, and watch as something real flies over and away from it. Trico and the boy's journey, and the very troubles the game may have experienced itself behind closed doors is, well, an unfortunate analogy. Both on screen and behind it, something unfeeling has been attached from the very start. The intent of the engine will never entirely belong to just one author in this industry. How can it, when it can be so easily shifted to become something it was never meant to, until it no longer resembles the thing it ever was? We just take some collective solace in the idea that, hopefully, that won't be forever. We will have to see a collapse of that structure in our lifetime, for the better or for the worst. This long-awaited industry-watch title taking a moment to strike out literally and figuratively at something that's a true detriment to life itself. To the idea that people, that connection, isn't what's ultimately at the heart of any of these visions. Fate would always eventually have seen the struggle of this system ended. Man would rebel, or the Guardians would eventually take all that they could. Thankfully though, fate chose to intervene early. You became the chosen ones not because fate bonded you together, but through what you both did once it had done. At the end, after being burned by the valley for one last time, Trico, on broken wings, barely alive, finally takes the boy home. Once there, you have no choice but to say it. Amidst the confusion and the fear, you tell him to go. Whilst it's not where you wanted it to end, it is the end nonetheless, and the need to tell him to be his own guardian, to do something for just himself, has never been more important. In return for the ultimate act of kindness, bringing you to somewhere where, if he stays, he will most certainly be killed, you must simply just show back that kindness, and say goodbye. The game asks you not to consider what you've been given by it, but how much you might now still give to it. One last time, accept him as your equal, and let him do what is right for him. Let him fly to different, but most certainly better things. Simply give back that same empathy one last time. Let that mean more than anything else. Let that mean more than what you thought would be. You're new forever. There's no one video where I sum up the impact of these games, let alone just The Last Guardian. So I will simply state that, unlike in most games, I see the people behind this one. It's not some rallying call for studios to immediately shift to experimental productions, but after 10 years of development, I'm still willing to bet that this one and what Japan Studio in general were putting out still cost less and honestly hurt fewer people than those blunders that Sony today will just see bomb and pretend don't exist. The Last Guardian is not necessarily just continued validation of games as an art form, but more importantly the people and what they have to give to make them. There with Trico and the boys sat together in the sun, and then again with an older man holding that same mirror to the sky, hoping that his friend might still know him. I see why this game will always be a part of me. I haven't in my time come to see loneliness as natural or a shield of sorts, but as what could still bring us together. We connect when we have nothing else, and that need not be something that lasts, but I know that the perspective that comes with it will do. That will be forever. My drifting between different paths, my choosing to leave the people that I care about behind, they are all regrets that I carry. They're moments that my mind draws to just so effortlessly, but I don't let them overwhelm me anymore. I don't let them overwhelm the person that I am now. Someone who may never settle, but who has come to terms with living with the finite, the knowledge of what I regret but cannot change. If I have to let go, then I can again, and for just then I get to feel more in control than I know I ever really am. To think that I may still be doing some good, for someone. I would rather live knowing that everything I was to them and everything that they were to me might be something gone, but it's still lasting, instead of hurting until it just had to go. I can live that and make that part of me. Live by that fact. For how else might we live this extraordinary story?